All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are reconvened back in open session. We have no action on closed session items, so we are ready for our to begin our review items. Our first item for review is the adoption of Proclamation 2015 Instructional Resources. Dr. Dupree, do we have a presentation, or are we just...
Dr. Hill, are you presenting that, or do you have anyone on your team?
Hi. Each year we provide different curriculum updates and resources for board consideration. These resources have undergone review as per state mandate, textbook, and resource committee adoption. These are listed for you: grades 9 through 12 math courses and associated resources, K through 12 fine arts, K through 12 social studies, principles of floral design, which is a CTE class, and various advanced placement courses. These have been outlined for you in the attached documents, and I have the coordinators for the various content areas here, and we also have some people who were on the textbook resource adoption committees present and can address any specific questions you might have about a resource.
Thank you, Dr. Hill. Do we have any questions? This is toss in.
So, to start, I would like to make a general comment that I was counting up, and we have 13 out of the 30 resources listed are from Pearson, and 11 are from McGraw-Hill. Pearson is one of those corporate entities that disturbs me a great deal the further it's getting its claws into education. It's becoming a de facto monopoly, in my opinion. And so I get a little concerned when I see Pearson being the publisher of a large portion, almost half of the textbooks that we're using. I understand that we have some limited resources. So my first question is, do we have other options other than Pearson? We are already using them and giving a lot of money to them to develop the STAR testing and to provide those materials. And I know that they are doing a lot of work and development of Common Core, which we supposedly don't have here in Texas. But the more these textbooks are developed by a company that is involved in developing Common Core, the more Common Core concepts we're going to get in the textbooks and in our classrooms. So my first question is, do we have other options?
We do have other options, and Ms. Tassan, I would tell you that I can find some agreement on a number of points with Pearson and the testing or assessment venue, and but we do have, the state outlines a textbook adoption process whereby we bring in teachers who review and utilize, trial copies of these resources. And because they are the users and the content experts, they look at all of the resources that are approved by the state and then narrow it down for voting. And these are the resources that were chosen by our teachers.
Are we seeing that the majority of the resources that are approved by the state are Pearson resources?
I think Pearson and McGraw-Hill are major publishers, and as we continue with more and more online products. For example, in higher ed, very often they only buy rights to a chapter or a unit rather than the whole book. That cuts into the profit of a lot of publishers, and so in the field of competition, it's just as it is with contracting, building, anything else. It's easier for larger companies to sustain growth in a very competitive market. Pearson also, while I certainly don't agree with the testing or the assessment monopoly, they do have some very good products. I think that is why, and I'm certainly not advocating for Common Core by any means, but I think that's why they've been picked up by states that have adopted Common Core. That's a whole lot of review in a lot of states. They have the means and are able to develop some quality products, and I think that's why our teachers have selected those particular products. I'd like to point out that that's how those products came. It wasn't Susan Verdakis or Ginger Carabine, these are the things we want. It was going through a process that is mandated by the state.
Yeah, and I completely respect our teachers and the fact that they get to review them, and I know that they're looking for the best resource for their students in their classroom. So, I absolutely appreciate that. I am concerned about the reach that Pearson is having in Texas in general. And so I'd also like to specifically point out that I guess 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of the math books out of 9 are Pearson, and we are going through math right now, and I know a lot of that is outside of your control and the control of this district because it's being handed down through the TEKS, but I do have a great deal of concern at where we're going in math and what our children are having to go through, and so the math in particular concerns me, so I'll just make that statement. There is one book on the list, the 6th grade social studies book. Is it Cengage National Geographic is the publisher?
Yes, ma'am.
If I said that correctly. And I went through and looked, other than the fact that it is based on Common Core, which it states in the book that it is based on Common Core, which is one reason that I would be not in favor of adopting that book. But there are several statements in it that are troubling, particularly in the realm of global warming. So I guess I'll take Mr. Rosenthal's polar bear and put it in front of my, and I don't have a problem with different theories being asserted in books. I have no problem with that. I am in favor of local control and parental control in determining how they guide their children through some of these issues. The problem I have is that there are several statements that I've picked out of the book that don't appear to show the other side of the argument. It seems to be assumed that it's a fact, even though there are scientists that disagree. One statement in particular says it's easy to get depressed about climate change. I'm not sure that we should be suggesting to 6th graders that they be depressed about, or how they should feel about it, or why they should be depressed about it. So just that in general being asserted in a textbook troubles me. There's some references to Katrina, which some of my family lived through, and they make some specific statements about how the government handled or didn't handle that I think are debatable. So in general, I have a problem when we have ideology on either side in a textbook, and we're not balancing it with the other viewpoint. And there were several of these that I pulled out of this textbook in particular. One of the statements seemed to suggest that that farming was hurting the environment and therefore we shouldn't support farming. So there were just several things like that that were troubling to me. Some statements about commercial drilling in the Gulf of Mexico. We need to be very careful in this area talking badly about the oil and gas industry. I know personally we had an experience in one of our schools where a presentation was made and my daughter came home thinking that drilling is bad and it hurts the environment, and so the work that her daddy does is bad, and therefore her daddy must be doing bad things. So I just want to be careful as we're presenting these things to our children that we are at least presenting a fair and balanced view. But this textbook in particular troubles me a great deal. There was a lot in it that I thought was biased and at least did not present both sides of the view.
I think there are people that are more familiar than I am with individual resources, so I'll speak broadly and then let someone else speak that could speak to that particular resource. I can tell you that textbooks are just that. They are a resource. And that some of our very best teachers use multiple resources. Most of our teachers use multiple resources, and very few teachers do or should lockstep just the textbook. We also have provided training for our all of our social studies teachers on how to teach from an unbiased viewpoint in addressing the curriculum, because a lot of things, whether you're talking about war, aggression, cultural diversity, there are many, many things in social studies that are controversial to different groups of people. And I certainly understand my grandfather retired from George Brown Oil. My grandmother retired from George Brown. I mean, I come from Garza County. You can smell it before you see it because of oil exploration. So I'm not one to throw the oil exploration or our energy corridor under the bus. And I don't think that any of our teachers or our curriculum and instruction department is. I can tell you as a former high school English teacher, many things that we read or discussed were controversial. There were authors that were more controversial than others. And part of what I believe is a student's education, and I think that it's a teacher's responsibility to teach students that just because something's in print, just because one group of people believe a certain way, does not make it true, does not make it a fact. And we have to teach them to think. There are some things that are concrete facts. There are some things that are included in the TEKS. The TEKS include that we must teach about renewable resources and so forth. But we have a responsibility to teach students how to think and how to determine what they believe. And I think that through our managed curriculum, the Department of School Leadership is committed to making sure that we do have unbiased instruction. In fact, February 16th, we are providing professional development, and we did a trainer of trainers model for our principals a couple of weeks ago. I think it was actually about 3 weeks ago. And included in that model is revisiting teaching from an unbiased standpoint across all content areas. And I think because that is something that's vital in every area, whether it's science, literature, social studies, we must continually revisit that, because teachers have their own ideology. We could have a textbook that took an opposing view of that, and if we do not continually remind teachers that your views are that, they are your views, but we have a responsibility to teach students and teach them to think so that they can arrive at their views.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate that we have a policy for an unbiased curriculum and that our teachers are implementing that in the classroom. I'm just concerned about a textbook that we have sitting in front of kids that says that something is a fact. I mean, it's presenting one side as a fact as if there's not an alternate view or theory. And so that was my biggest concern about that, and the fact that I mean, when you tell children who are in 6th grade, who are very impressionable, that they should be depressed about something, just that whole line was troubling to me. And I read through all of these, and it was really the only one that stood out to me. Mr. Rosenthal may have a different view, but it was the one that really stood out to me. And my request would be, I don't know if we have others that we can look at that may meet our requirements and maybe not have that same.
Ms. Rodakis, Ms. Corbett.
I would just add to the comments that have been made that in each of the areas within social studies, there were multiple options that the teachers could consider. And so the teachers have had basically since August and September to look at those using a rubric that we developed in the district that looks at the content alignment to our standards, as well as issues like technology and addressing the needs of diverse learners and things like that. So they're using a framework that is a broad framework, and they did have the opportunity to view multiple resources. And those resources are still available to the board members to look at if you want to see those through our textbook warehouse program. So just know that they did have multiple options in each of the cases. I also want to point out that, as you've noted, that we have several Pearson selections. We have McGraw-Hill selections. It's interesting, too, that it came out this way because these committees did not work together. So it wasn't as though we were looking for necessarily a particular program adoption. The committees worked by grade level and by course, and it happened that these two vendors that you've pointed out did secure, or they didn't secure, but the teachers chose from those particular areas. And I would also say, too, Ms. Tossan, I'm sorry, one of the things that would be a next step for us in the district is to take these resources, any resources that that are approved, and begin the curriculum alignment. Because as Dr. Hill said, it's not just going to be based on a textbook. The textbook is not our curriculum. And so we would definitely identify areas where we feel like we need to bring in the other viewpoint and provide other resources that present that balanced and unbiased perspective into the curriculum and make those available to teachers as well.
Okay, and thank you for that explanation. That's very helpful. One last thing, since you mentioned the technology portion of the textbooks, now that everything's online, another thing I was looking into that this particular textbook offers are adult pen pals, and there are advertisements through the videos and that kind of thing. So I assume our students are going to have full access to the technology, and I'll just state in advance that I have a 7th grader who was just a 6th grader. It might worry me a little bit for her to have an adult pen pal through a textbook, and I'm, you know, the advertisements, I realize everybody's doing that now, but I feel like we're paying for the resource. Why does my child have to sit through some propaganda, you know, for advertisements and that kind of thing? I understand you guys don't control that, but in this particular resource, and it may be across the board, I don't know, but in this particular resource, I noticed that it offered that, and I was a little concerned about that as well.
Well, that would also be something that we would look at as we would move forward with any of these vendors, is what does the online access actually provide for students, and what would we need to do as a district in terms of filtering or you know, using certain components versus others. So that's a whole other aspect to this that we would look at moving forward.
So we can shut down certain aspects of the technology such that they would not be able to utilize it?
It could be an option, again, depending on the full range of what each vendor offers. And that would be a conversation that we would have moving forward with them.
Okay, so that's something I would like to know, is whether or not, because that part of it was a little discomforting for me. And again, I might like to see what other options we have. I'm not in any way discounting what our teachers have and the efforts that they put into this and the work they put into this. I completely respect that. I guess as a parent speaking, it's something that, I would probably like to see us do. Thank you very much.
Okay, Mr. Rosenthal?
Can I borrow Pete?
Formalities. So I am equally concerned about what I just heard. And, we have this policy and we keep hearing, well, we're teaching them how to teach it unbiased. And that's all fine and dandy. But why start with something so biased and then have to undo it? And that doesn't make sense to me. So personally, I would recommend finding a different option. I will amend this next week to ask for that, so it might be something to look into. Phyllis, along the lines of your comments, just over the last several years, I've had a lot of experience, and I've seen a lot of things come home with my kids. They've told me all kinds of things that are said in the classroom, and it's very rarely the opposing point of view. Very rarely do they get both sides of arguments. So I would say until we're really ready and until we really start seeing that, then I would not start with these things. So, and then, so I would say, to me, I think we could probably do better. I used to get National Geographic, and I saw how biased it was, and I don't get it anymore. I also have a concern about another text, and that is the AP Economics by Mr. Krugman. I don't know how many people know about Paul Krugman. He's actually a Nobel Prize winner, but then again, so is Yasser Arafat. The man is a man of the hard left. The man is incredibly biased. And I will read some things in, and then I will also, we have a little movie, not yet. So, turns out that there's a review of this text, and I'll just read the first couple paragraphs. Throughout the entire textbook, there are historical, factual, and statistical distortions. For example, Chapter 36, the modern macroeconomic consensus, contains 16 sweeping generalizations, such as nearly all economists now agree there is a broad consensus. Today, most macroeconomists believe, or almost all macroeconomists now accept. None of these assertions are backed up with even a single citation. If a student were to submit an essay with such disregard for basic evidence, it would ensure a failing grade. I find it troubling. Krugman's Economics for AP concludes that Reagan's supply-side economics is generally dismissed by economic researchers. The main reason for this dismissal is lack of evidence. It's just this whole thing. I mean, this man, he believes in one thing, and that's big government, more spending, and let's roll this little clip, and you'll see all about what he believes, and then I'll explain. He's the first person you'll see here. I think it's that Google, yeah, that Google Chrome thing, yeah.
Down again, and it took the enormous public works program known as World War II to bring the economy out of the depression.
I want you to read that. He's saying that 9/11 can do some economic good. He really said that. Might as well get a little economics lesson, huh? This is actually really good.
What is the broken window fallacy? It all starts when a hooligan decides to throw a brick through the local baker's window. The community gathers at the bakery to discuss what has happened.
I feel bad for that poor baker. He's lost a window.
It's true. But if you stop and think about it, maybe it's not all that bad. After all, the baker does have to repair his window, which means the glazier will now have work to do. After getting paid, the glazier will probably spend his new income on some of your crops. Then you'll have income to spend on even more goods and services.
Biscuits and gravy. The hooligan has actually stimulated the economy. Imagine how many more jobs would have been created.
It's funny, but this is what this guy believes, and we're going to teach this as an AP course? I mean...
Have you all lost your minds? Haven't you read Frederick Bastiat by Henry Hazlitt? You're only focusing on what's a scene, the money I will spend repairing the broken window, or while you will ignore what's unseen, the money I would have spent on a new suit. The tailor would have also spent his new income on some of your crops, a farmer giving you more income to spend on other goods and services. The only difference is that I would have had both my window and a new suit, whereas now I only have a window. This hooligan has cost our community a new suit.
The story of the hooligan shows us that physical damage destroys wealth. After all, if the hooligan's act actually did stimulate the economy, then society would have been better off if he had destroyed the sign, the building, and the rest of the town. But the broken window fallacy is much more prevalent than it may first seem. In fact, it remains at the core of mainstream policymaking. For example, when the government claims to create jobs by financing public works programs, such as construction, it does so at the expense of its citizens in the form of either higher taxes or inflation. The citizens would have spent their tax dollars on other goods and services, like refrigerators or surfboards or movie tickets, which would have increased job growth in those industries. Because these goods will never be produced, however, these potential jobs remain unseen, but they are no less real and no less important as the jobs that we do see. So if you ever hear of the stimulative effects of wartime spending, tariffs, or stimulus bills, know that this is merely our old friend, the broken window fallacy, dressed in new clothing and grown fat beyond recognition.
Thank you, Dave, for sharing. Do you have further comments?
Yes, I do. There's some more reviews of
Many people argue that government spending creates jobs, reduces unemployment. For example, if the government...
That's more of the same. Mr. Krugman is not a good example for our students, and I highly recommend that we reconsider this. And once again, I will do the same thing. I will amend the agenda next week and recommend that we pull that. But I want to read one more thing. This is in Forbes magazine fairly recently, responding to an article that Krugman just wrote on inflation. Krugman consistently misrepresents his opponent's positions, constructs fictive straw men, addresses marginal figures, and ignores inconvenient truths set forward by many people. This guy is not someone we want to be teaching. It is one-sided, it is incredibly biased, it is without fact in many cases, and this goes strictly against our policy. And I really don't believe that if that text is in an AP classroom, that those teachers are going to find all kinds of other materials to counterbalance that. So I highly recommend that we get rid of that.
All right. Do we have any other comments or questions? I have a question on the art materials. when we're looking at those, you've got things listed like iPads, Apple TV. What does that mean?
The instructional materials allotment allows school districts to choose from more than just print materials. And as we go into art, much of the instruction takes on a graphic and more digital approach. But
the standard textbook for art is published by Davis. Davis basically, in this current edition, changed the cover of the book and changed a few images. The book itself is pretty much as it was in the last edition. So when our art teachers met together and they weighed the options, what they decided was, instead of buying the same textbook again that they already have, they'd prefer other resources where they could have a library of images that they could show on their iPad and also immediately show on their project on the screen. The iPad also has the capability of the teacher can take it around to the student artwork in the room and then project the artwork up on the television or up on the projector via the Apple TV. So it has a lot of multiple functions.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Drew. Do we have any other questions? Mrs. Bailey, you appear to have a question.
Did we look at any other AP economics textbooks that could be a better alternative?
Yes, I believe there were other options, and we have our district representative, Mr. Chuck Brownson, here who can speak to that and give us a little insight on the committee's discussions.
Sure, okay. Right, yikes, I'm not used to doing this. There were three other options that we looked at, a Pearson book, a McGraw-Hill book, and the third was the third other book was a Cengage book for AP Economics. Now, to Mr. Rosenthal's concerns, they are certainly legitimate, and they are concerns that I had when we first started looking at all the textbooks, and in my discussions with the other AP Economics teachers around the district, there are concerns that other teachers had as well. We met together as a group, the AP Economics teachers and I met 2 times collectively. We also met a 3rd time with all the publishers, just the AP Economics teachers and the publishers at Dulles High School for a forum. And then we met as well a 4th time at, I believe it was up here, in fact. Or no, it was at the Annex. With all the publishers from AP Social Studies. And so, anyway, after a lot of discussion and a lot of careful deliberation, 8 of the 10 schools who voted on the AP Economics book voted for this particular book. We did so for several reasons. Number one, it is easily the book that is most aligned with the College Board's course description and the AP exam in particular. The book itself is Krugman's Economics for AP. It is adapted from Paul Krugman's and Robin Wells's introductory college textbook. It is not written by Paul Krugman. It is written by Margaret Ray and David Anderson, who are themselves college professors. They are members of or have been members of the College Board and the AP Test Development Committee. They have written AP exams. They have written the free response questions for the AP exams. They have trained the teachers in grading the FRQs, the free response questions, and sat there and graded them themselves. The reviewers for the textbook, many of them are table leaders and question leaders at the AP reading. So in comparison with the other books, the reason that we chose this, despite what our legitimate concerns were and what we knew, some of the community's legitimate concerns would be, it is most aligned with the College Board curriculum. I was watching your video, and I can tell you, I've been teaching AP Economics, macro and micro, this is my first year teaching micro, for 11 years now, and I've never heard of the broken window fallacy. Okay, I checked in the index of the book, it's not in there. It has never been on the College Board AP exam. And so, to the degree that, that it's going to be taught in classes, it just isn't. One thing that I noticed was left out of the video when it was talking about the public works programs, how they can be paid for. One thing that wasn't mentioned in the video was additional debt that, of course, the government can take on in order to pay for this, these public works programs. That concept is discussed in particular in the book in the form of a pretty substantial discussion of the crowding out effect, which is how private investment gets crowded out through the additional government spending that's taken on. I can assure you that from everything I've looked at in this textbook, which is a great deal over the last, 5 months or so, 6 months, it is a very neutral textbook. I could point to, I mentioned the discussion of the fiscal policy versus the crowding out effect, and that being in there. There's a section in here, I think there's probably no subject on which Paul Krugman has been more outspoken than the stimulus effect, or the stimulus of 2008, 2009. And there's a section in this book specifically addressing the stimulus package. It's on page 213. I can tell you I've read it a couple of different times. It is neutral in every sense of the word. You could call it bland. It doesn't take a stand on either side much. It doesn't, I wouldn't even argue it. It argues both sides. It doesn't take a position on the stimulus. And I think the reason for that is the book isn't written by Paul Krugman. It is adapted from his textbook. Is there anything else I can address in specific, or?
I would just say thank you.
Okay.
You definitely explained your and I think your explanation of it being aligned with College Board kind of explains everything, since we know they are going towards Common Core. So thank you.
Mr. Rosenthal?
Yes, thank you for that. I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name. Okay, Brownson, Mr. Brownson. I guess that, in a way, it kind of, the fact that you've never heard of the broken window theory, and maybe most teachers haven't. So how would you then balance a statement by, again, maybe that's not in there. I actually will take a look at that book over the next week. When he starts talking about how World War II created an economic stimulus, because that's a great counter-argument. And there are several others too. So my point is, if this stuff is in here, and again, I'm going based on reviews, I haven't looked at it personally yet, but I will, then I guess I'm still very concerned that there's not enough either material or experience in countering some of the bias that he typically comes from. Maybe it's not in that book, but.
Sure. Okay, the last thing I'll say, and it's usually followed by several minutes of me talking. But the last thing I'll say is that I'll notice in the video that you showed, they seem to be reviewing Paul Krugman, the New York Times editorial author, and not the actual textbook itself.
That video has nothing to do. That's an example of Paul Krugman saying how 9/11 was a stimulus to the economy, because that's the way he thinks. I mean, he's a Keynesian type. Okay, that's what they think.
Okay, and the other thing is that While the book will talk about how things like public works programs and spending on national defense and things of this nature will stimulate spending in the economy, if we're looking for a balanced effect, it is also going to then talk about the negative elements to that, the downsides to that, namely the additional debt that's created and the downsides of the debt, the increased interest rates that are going to be caused by the additional spending, and so forth. So, I mean, I think when you look at the where it discusses specifically fiscal policy and those the negative effects of fiscal policy, that will probably be the best example when you look at the book to see that it does present both sides of that argument. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Brownson. Do we have any other questions about the instructional materials? And Dr. Dupree, these materials are still available for us to look at, or they're available online, or what's the?
They're available to you to look at. Susan, you want to address that?
Right. They are currently at our textbook warehouse where they've been for about the last month, and they will be available all this week. They have the books laid out so that you could go over there during the day and spend time looking at them.
And we do know some of you have day jobs, so if we can support you by being available into the evening, we would be happy to do that if you'd like to give us some time.
All of us have day jobs.
Thank you, Kristen.
Nothing intended by that remark.
Thank you, Mrs. Tossan, for that clarification.
This is the hard copy we are talking about. Do we have access to any kind of online book or anything like that?
They get access to online?
I can follow up with our textbook steward to see if we can make some online copies available to you. That varies by publisher, so it may be that we have both, or print or online. I'll follow up with that.
Yeah, that would be helpful because we have day jobs, so thank you.
One other thing that I'd like to add to is, since it was referenced a couple of times, there are no common core standards for social studies. Just in case everybody, the Common Core deals with literacy and math primarily. There are no Common Core standards for social studies.
Thank you, Mrs. Vorodakis. All right, I think we're ready to move on to the next item then, which is item B, submission of Multivariable Calculus Innovation Course Renewal with the TEA. Thank you, all of you teachers who are here tonight. Thank you for all your hard work in evaluating these items. So this is the multivariable calculus course. Do we have any questions? Does anybody have any questions about this? Is this course available to, you listed in the information that it was being taught at Clements High School and Dulles High School. Is it available at other campuses?
Good evening. I can take that question. It is available to be offered at other campuses if we have enough students who've completed BC Calculus and have a need for multivariable. To date, we haven't had another campus that has had an interest with a number of students to offer the course.
And do we have a uniform course selection guide so that even if there isn't a qualified teacher at that campus at the moment, students can choose that as a selection?
Yes, it is listed on the course selection, and we do have a qualified teacher for multivariable calculus on every campus. The qualification is teaching BC Calculus, so we do have a qualified teacher on every campus.
I have a question. Let's say in one campus they don't have enough students to have a class. Do they have access to, they can go to another campus and like maybe Dallas or Clements can get access to get enrolled those classes?
What I would recommend in that case is that we utilize distance learning. Sometimes when a student goes to M.R. Wood or Henry, we will utilize distance learning to put them in a classroom teacher's course. We had that in the past before pre-calculus was part of the recommended plan.
Right.
So we kind of paired them up with a teacher so that they could take the course. We wouldn't want to deny anyone that wanted to take it. We'd have to use an alternative method to get them the instruction.
Yeah, that's my concern because because we don't have, enough of a class capacity. I don't want anybody denied of that opportunity. That was my concern.
Absolutely.
I think that's a really important point, Mr. George, and I would say that sometimes the breakdown in communication comes in the counseling offices, so I'd be really careful to make sure that campuses know that there's different ways to meet the students' needs.
Okay, thank you.
All right, do we have any other questions on that? All right, moving on. This is a memorandum of understanding between Wharton County Junior College and Fort Bend ISD for dual credit courses. Do you have any questions, Mr. George?
Dual credit courses are, in my opinion, it's very important to offer to our students. I come to know or discussed with, especially when I went to TASB conference, how Austin ISD is very successfully implementing that without any cost to the student. And also Alvin ISD, I talked to somebody, they have a $25 enrollment fee or whatever for getting the course credit. They could get enrolled. And I believe in having some kind of contribution from students so that they take it seriously. But at the same time, in this, I read saying that the full cost, textbooks, everything is on student. And again, my concern there is, if that's the case, how many students, I mean, sometimes incentive is also an important factor. Okay, I get it for half the price or something, can make that enrollment go up, or more participation we can include. And I'm just asking, I don't know what is the reason why you all decided this way. Maybe there is a reason behind it, and I'm not questioning it, but did you ever thought about it, looking into that, so students get an opportunity to?
We are, and actually, as you know, we're at the leading edge of a great deal of planning. And this is just one of those things. We're trying to formalize the arrangements. And actually, this covers the current year where students are currently enrolled as well. And so our objective is to increase dual credit over time. But it's going to take planning, and as you mentioned, it could take district contribution of resources along with the partnering with students, and they bring money to the table as well. But we need time to develop that in the right way. And so for now, we're continuing as we are on these classes with the understanding we're planning to roll out greater plans and a broader program in the future.
Are we looking into other districts, those who are successfully implementing this kind of plans?
We sure are, absolutely. One of the things we run into, though, is it's very different in various communities based on the community college they partner with.
Sure.
Because, for example, I know from my experience in the Austin area, Austin Community College charged nothing to students, and I think even here, you know, HCC charges an amount, or they work out negotiations that are significantly less than what a student would have to pay with Wharton. And so we're having to work with multiple partners, and various communities have different arrangements.
Are we have any discussion with HCC?
We are.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, do we have any more questions on that, Mr. Burdine?
Yes, what is memorandum of understanding, yeah, what does that actually mean? Is that a contract, or is that a gentleman's agreement, or what is that?
You know, I'm going to let our attorney answer that, because I'd like for him to distinguish between a memorandum of understanding and a contract. And
yep. Mr. Morris, you'll need a microphone.
Please.
So a memorandum of understanding is not the same as a contract generally. A contract is binding and enforceable in a court. Oftentimes you will see parties enter into a memorandum of understanding that will govern their actions, but it doesn't necessarily follow that if one were to violate the expectations of that memorandum of understanding that it would be enforceable in court. Sometimes, though, memorandums of understanding are written in such a way that while they're labeled as memorandums of understanding, they in essence function like true contracts, but that is an issue of wordsmithing. So in this context, though, I think given the nature of the program, it's simply meant to govern the expectations of the other parties, but there's not a hard enforceable promise as to how they'll conduct themselves under the agreement like you would find in a binding contract. That help, or that answer your question?
No, it does. So I guess it's a benefit to us as a district to have a memorandum of understanding versus a contract, or?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Is it a benefit to us as a district to have a memorandum of understanding versus a contract, do you think?
It depends, but sometimes in relationships like this where even the expectations would be terminable at will by either party under a contract, then you're really agreeing to operate together on a good faith basis. So in certain contexts like this, it's appropriate to have a memorandum of understanding.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. Thank you, Mr. Burdine. Do we have other questions? All right. And our next item is item D, which is the additional staffing positions for 2015-16. We went over that pretty thoroughly in the other portion of our meeting, so I think we can move through that unless, does anybody have any other questions? You can mail those in, email those in. All right, I'm scrolling through here. So next we're on to purchasing items. The first one is the fall sports apparel, equipment, and related items. And is this going, it says it's for the 2014-15 year. I guess it's the spending would occur during this year in anticipation of the 15-16 seasons. Is that what?
That's correct.
Okay.
And the contract is renewable for 4 additional years.
Thank you. Do we have any questions on this for the fall sports equipment? All right. The next one is band uniforms at Hightower High School. I'm a big fan of this. Not afraid to say. Yes. Do we have any questions about the band uniforms at Hightower High School? This again is spending now for the fall. All right. So now we're to page 68, those of you following at home. And this is the multiple integrated educational systems, also known as Eduphoria. So do we have questions or comments on this?
Yeah, I do.
All right, Mr. Rosenthal.
We're confident that we're going to be able to install and implement this.
We are confident that we will be able to install this and the PDOS by the start of, let me see if I have it right. On the memo, I do believe that I did send out the estimated time frame. You can bear me with a second. By May to August, we'll be having IT administrator and user training. And then August 1st, we're going to go live with Eduphoria, Aware, and PDOS, which is doing the assessment, sir.
Okay, and can you tell me why you think this is better than what we have?
Right now, we have struggles to get active support from PCG.
I would suggest we let the chief academic officer address
I would
that.
love to address this, Mr. Rosenthal.
I mean, I've heard for the past few years all about this thing.
I've been
When it was
talking
called,
about this since I think my first week here. I think our teachers are not by nature people who walk into classrooms, slam the door, and want to work in isolation. However, during the previous data teams training and implementation, the data was so difficult to manage and to get to that it became quite laborious for our teachers to generate the reports and follow the data, which the emphasis of teacher collaboration should be to guide instruction, to know how to help students, to know what students know, what students are struggling with, and I'm afraid the tail was wagging the dog. They were spending all of their time trying to dig out the data, and it's just not a very user-friendly system. In fact, we have a number of assistant superintendents and people who are in CNI, and it's not even very user-friendly at our level for us to manage the data. One of the things that I think will really help is, in addition to being much more user-friendly, we can use it to store formative assessments, and that's something we're not doing with PCG, so that if teachers, like third grade teachers, decide they're going to give a math assessment over what they've taught the last 2 weeks to see who grasped it and who didn't, they can run that data through scanners and it will almost seamlessly generate the report. We're not able to do that with PCG. Now, in the vein of total transparency, I am very optimistic that we will have a good implementation, but just without anything new, with anything new, I'm sure we will have some implementation gulch. But I will tell you, I feel like I've been in PCG implementation gulch since I got here, because it just is not a very user-friendly system. It stores the information, we have the information, but even at our level, we are continuously having to go to accountability and so forth and ask them for reports that in other arenas we were accustomed to being able to generate ourselves.
So you bird walking on that a little bit?
I'm bird walking a little bit, but yes, sir, I think it's a good system. I think that the reviews show that it's a good system. I remember sitting and watching the demonstration, and the people in the audience were like, oh, this is much easier.
So will we get some kind of feedback after, a period of time so that we know that everybody's happy with this?
Could you give us till December to roll it out?
Yeah.
Okay.
I said after a period of time.
All right. We will get back to you. This is a critical part of our professional learning communities. They are not data teams. The emphasis is on student learning. And I think that having the data readily accessible so the collaboration can focus on the instruction, the standards, what students are struggling with, will enable them to focus on what teachers should be focusing on, and that's helping students learn rather than just being number crunchers.
Thank you. Did I understand from reading this that the curriculum management part and the professional development management part are kind of on hold?
We do. It is difficult for us to upload curriculum updates into PCG, but we also think that people can only take so much change at one time for a smooth implementation. And if we tried to change all the wheels and systems at one time, I think that that's too much change for our teachers. And we are also in the process of some major TEKS revision and curriculum updates. So we would like to continue to do that in the system we have, get these other systems up and running, and then migrate over and train on that separately. So there would be some overlap between the two systems while we're doing that.
All right. Mrs. Tassan, you have a question?
So I assume we're going to have someone in charge of implementation and making sure that that goes smoothly.
Yes, ma'am.
You mean like a project manager?
Like a project manager?
Yes, we will have a project manager, Ms. Ann Howard.
Okay. And so is she with technology or is she with?
She was IT.
So who's going to
collaborate
on your side?
We have Lynette's group, and we also have some data specialists in our Title I schools and so forth that were part of the old data team's configuration, and we're going to use a trainer of trainers model with field support.
Okay, that's good to know.
You're welcome. I am excited, I have to say that.
All right, very well. Thank you, Dr. Hill. We can tell you're excited. We'd like to get you through that gulch and to the other side. All right, our next thing, gosh, this is a long contract that I'm scrolling through. So our next item is the bus GPS system and installation, the bus GPSs.
Good question.
Mrs. Bailey has a question.
Of the 467 buses, that includes the special ed buses?
Well, actually, they're 480. Go ahead, Max.
Yes, ma'am. It includes all the buses. Yes, ma'am.
Next, you have 467. I imagine the special ed are part of the 467, and then the 20 white buses.
White fleet.
What are the white buses used for?
Those are just district administration vehicles.
Yeah, that's for white fleet. It's
Oh, the
like
white fleet, but not the white
the
school
white
buses.
buses as well. Yes, ma'am.
The white school buses.
And this is Michael Brassfield, our
We've been waiting for you all night.
Director of Transportation.
There are 6 activity buses that have air conditioning, they have understorage, and we're going to put a GPS on those buses as well. The other white fleet would include Tahoes, because we do have students that travel in Tahoes, going to different places, as well as our units, like our cars, that our supervisors use to go out and look at different places. This particular item will also help us. For example, we could take a car, drive a route, and then that route appears on our routing mapping system, in which we can implement a route from driving a car and looking at it. And a lot of times we have to draw in new streets that are constantly being built. This gives us better accuracy when we go out and measure. We'll take the car out, drive it, and then that street leaves breadcrumbs. We take those breadcrumbs and we actually add the streets into the system from that.
That's very clever.
21st century.
What
kind of bread? We're making it.
And you're ready for it, right?
I am so
You're
ready
for it to be installed?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Rosenthal has a question.
I just have a quick question. I read about the cost increases that seem kind of unexpected. Can you just go into that a little bit?
I don't know that it was a cost increase so much as that it was the budget was for material only, and the last director had an idea that we were going to install them ourselves, and then I think now the direction is to get them all installed at once and have them done hopefully by this spring break, be done with it and move forward.
Thanks.
And do we need some type of wireless infrastructure at our bus barns in order to be able to download this information from these machines, or is it just all go to the satellite and come to some hub somewhere?
This goes to the satellite and into a web-based program where we can just log right in and see it.
I see.
It is a protected service, so it's limited. Now I can see it from wherever I am or wherever any of our supervisors are. We are able to access that through password and security systems.
All right. And would the police department have access to that as well?
They could.
They will.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief Ryder. Look.
Good answer.
I was hoping they would partner with us on that. I hadn't asked.
They're all about keeping the kids safe, and yeah, we're in favor. All right, do we have it? Mrs. Tossan, do you have a question?
Yeah, so Mr. Rosenthal stole my question a little bit there. So that was a significant increase for installation. It's like 26% more. It was a lot more. So you said originally they just didn't quote that?
I think
Did we not ask
our
for it?
original budget was $275 per bus per unit, and that basically covers the material, the labor. I believe it came out to $3 1/4 a bus, so it was $50 short per vehicle.
Okay. So my only question is I'm looking at the renewals over the next 5 years, and that's why this particular vendor came out at least lower on cost. So we have the second, third, fourth, and fifth year renewals at $102,000, which is significantly less than the next two vendors we have rated there. Do we have a guarantee that that's what the renewal cost is going to be, or is that an estimation?
I'm going to let Bob speak to that, the pieces about that.
Well, they're on record with $102,000, and the RFP package looked at the pricing over a 5-year horizon. So, you know, we would certainly bring all kinds of objections and probably worse than objections if they tried to increase that price. But the reason that's so much less is because there are charges in the first year that are set up, implementation charges, and then in the subsequent years there's mostly just service and airtime charges.
Right, I see the first year is significantly more than most of the others. And where it washes out is in those renewals.
That's correct.
So, yes, we would have much more than just objection if they came back.
We would.
As one of the board members, I would have a lot of objection if they came back higher, because really that's what gets them down.
That's what gets them down.
Yeah.
Well, what I would interject, and this kind of comes back to our question Rick answered earlier, this is a contract.
Yeah, good point.
That's what I wanted. That was my question.
Typically in contracts of this nature, if they often do have escalation clauses where it goes up 5% a year, and that's binding, and it happens. But if this is the contracted price and it's what we sign and the board approves, and then it's a contract and they're bound to it.
Well, that's
legally.
basically my question, because normally I would expect to see an escalation. I don't see it here. For them to flatline over 5 years is unusual. So that's why I asked if we have a guarantee if that is in the contract.
It will be.
Yeah, because the agreement we have just has
It doesn't have
1 year's worth, so we don't,
so
we
I'm
can't
not-
see the rest of that.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Do we have any other questions? All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ruskill. Our next item is cellular services, which is page 97. Do we have any questions on this one? No? Okay. Moving on to the next thing, which is the Kempner Ag Barn. There's a lot of pictures of hog pens and goat pens, and which I appreciate the thoroughness. I'm not saying so, does somebody have questions?
Yeah, I have a comment. Go ahead, Mr. Rosenthal.
I was just gonna, this question, not directly related to this, but when is the Travis facility gonna get going?
We actually are drafting a memo to that effect to give to the board in the next probably 3 weeks to kind of let y'all know where we stand, what the budget looks like.
So related to that, so this says this is coming out of 2007 bond contingency funds, which is different than the money in the 2007 bond for the West Side Ag project, which is what Mr. Rosenthal's referring to. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, thank you. Mr. Burdine.
Just like earlier, it wasn't me. Just like earlier, you said that something that the band uniforms excited me. This is what really excited me, and I know that the worst thing you want to deal with is bad drainage at an ag farm as a former FFA student. So I was just curious that we did get all of those issues fixed, and they're tested and proven. And
yes, sir. The Fort Bend County Road and Bridge crew has just been an outstanding partner with us. And if you haven't gotten a chance to go out to Kempner Ag Barn and look at what they've really done, they did a great job for us. So yes, the drainage is fixed.
okay, I know it stated it in there, but I guess it's been proven in the last few weeks. So
that's right. That's right.
Okay, thank you.
And did I understand this correctly, that we're buying the materials for building the pens and all of that, and then there's an estimation of labor, which is the job the job order contract? And is that included in this amount, or is it still to come?
No, ma'am, this is a turnkey price. This is through a job order contract. The materials are going to be procured from a place called Lone Star Livestock Equipment out in New Caney. And so the job order contractor will be providing the bond and then the oversight, the management of the project.
Okay, okay. But it's all inclusive in that?
Turnkey, yes, ma'am.
144,000. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, do we have any other questions about that one? All right, moving on to donations exceeding $10,000. I don't remember what they were, but we're very grateful for them. Still scrolling.
Page 151.
And I'll say it as I say it every time. I'm happy for these schools, but I'm sorry for the ones who don't have active PTAs and HOAs that will donate money to their school, because it just creates inequity. And I know we're always watching that and trying to keep up with it, but I really don't like inequity. All right, I'm still scrolling through pictures of hog pens. And
further to that comment, I'd like to make a comment. We had talked before about establishing maybe some kind of mentoring program between schools or some kind of partnership. So just in light of Ms. James's comment there, I don't know if that's something that we have looked into or we can look into.
It's on the list, but I think you know of everything we've been doing for the last 2 years. It's
just want to
definitely
make sure
on the
it's still
list.
on the list.
Yeah.
well, it's interesting you say that, because I've experienced where back in the day when I was a VIPS coordinator, we gathered several VIPS coordinators and we did things for MR Wood, for example, and we've done, I don't know if those types of things still go on, but there was a method to it and it was happening. So, but
some of that coming from Heritage Rose for 3 years. There are some schools in that area in particular that are interested in helping. Sometimes the problem is if you don't have a large volunteer organization at the school that needs the assistance, then there's no coordination and it gets really difficult to do. And while I know principals try to get involved, they have a lot to do. So it gets
and
very
it becomes
difficult.
A communication issue.
It does. So if we could just maybe think of some way to set up better communications, or to at least let the schools around the district know which schools they could maybe step in and help out or donate some services or money and that type of thing.
Right.
Anyway,
right.
Just a side note.
Thank you. I agree. All right. Next item is the Construction Manager Agent Program Management Services. Item G. Do we have questions? Or, yes, we have questions. Mrs. Tossan.
First of all, I noticed on page 152 it says the interview questions are included on the attached scoring tabulation. Did I miss that?
I didn't see it either.
They were included on an original tabulation, and I know the tabulation got reformatted. I don't know that it made it into the reformat.
It's not in the board book. Miss Bailey suggested maybe it was in the update, and
It's
because
definitely in the update.
Okay, I got my stuff
update
late,
2
so
weeks
I had
ago.
to
No, that was
pick
in
and
the last week's, though.
Oh.
The week before.
The week ago.
Okay, so I'll go back and look. One question I have, do we have any concern about having the same company that did the facility study also providing the management of the bond program?
I personally do not, and there actually could be some synergy with the fact that they did the study, that you know, they generated the data, they're familiar with our district, so I think there's probably some advantages.
I just want to be careful that we're not dipping into the same pot, so to speak, or using the same company too much, especially with regard to all of this planning and studying and management and oversight that we're doing. I know there's been some questions from the community about certain companies and whether or not their data is accurate or that types of things. So I just want us to keep in mind, as I was looking at it, it was one of the things that I thought of is, you know, maybe it would be better to find someone else that could just provide some oversight to the entire program and to that portion in particular. I'm not saying that you're wrong, and I definitely see the advantages, but that was something that stuck out to me and we might want to be mindful of. Was Jacobs vetted by the Bond Oversight Committee? Did we present this to them?
We, let's see, we had the first meeting that first week back. We told them who was on the short list, and we told them who we were going to be interviewing the next day. I think we met on a Wednesday, and we told them that tomorrow we would be interviewing the 3 shortlisted firms.
Was there any feedback from any of them?
Not that I can remember.
No, there wasn't, but we did ask them. We did ask them at the time. And, no, I mean, it really wasn't kind of a point for discussion. They really didn't seem to want to dwell on it.
Okay.
But we did talk about that when we interviewed. I mean, we did talk about that, and I brought it up, and if the second company had come up to the level that they were presenting, I mean, I personally would have scored them higher because of that, the political consequences. But some of the things that they offer, the fact that they do have the knowledge, the fact that they've already done something where it integrates with PeopleSoft, that was very important to us.
I saw that.
The software wasn't proprietary, so there were definitely some key advantages to going with them.
Did we vet any local firms that perhaps provide that service, like local to Fort Bend? Or are there any?
I don't
believe there are.
Okay.
None responded. I mean, Jacobs, I would consider it a local presence, not
okay.
Fort Bend, but they're
Texas.
Certainly Tollway.
Okay.
They're right here local. A lot of their employees are in Fort Bend County.
Ms. Tansan, let me just say that, we have to look at each solicitation package in and of itself, and we try to be as objective as possible, and we try to bring multiple viewpoints to the table when we go out and select our evaluation committees. We certainly understand the concerns that you've brought to the table here tonight, and they're very valid concerns, and they're always on our mind as we go through these things. But it was awfully clear from the evaluation that we had one company that really did rise above the others in terms of qualifications, and that's what we're supposed to be looking at. Request for qualifications in accordance with what the code says that we have to do, and I think we did that well.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Who will they be working with within the district?
They will actually, let's talk about they. That's a great question. They, in this contract, is going to actually be 13 full-time bodies, full-time equivalents, co-located with the design and construction department, and then another 15 personnel off-site at just various locations. And so they will be working with the design and construction department primarily. They'll be working with all the campuses, any campus that they touch. They'll be working with them. Tonight we've requested an executive director. That would be the absolute conduit that it would flow back to the board through.
Right.
But they would function as if they were embedded with the Fort Bend ISD Design and Construction Department. They would actually co-locate with us.
Okay. And is there going to be any kind of reporting to the Bond Oversight Committee?
Yes.
I assume we have that set up.
The reporting is one of the biggest pieces of the entire thing. Just like in the audit also showed that we could probably do a better job on reporting, and I know we can. And that's one of the things we specifically talked to them about was the reporting piece.
Okay,
so yes,
good.
they will be responsible for the reporting. We're responsible for it. They will help us gather the data to bring the reports forward, more meaningful, more timely.
And I assume we'll have a timeline or a schedule set up for that we can, in the future when we...
Yes, the way they work is they'll have either a 2 or a 3 day, we will have a 2 or a 3 day kickoff meeting and bring everyone to the table that needs to be there and basically get a roadmap forward. They call it the roadmap. And so that would be one of the first actions we do.
Okay, Thank you.
Yes.
This is Mr. Rosenthal.
Can you just briefly describe what one of these individuals may do for a particular project?
Well, like I said, there's many individuals, but
Right,
let me
but I'm
just give you an idea of like what some of what their titles might be and what they might do. So, for instance, the people embedded with Jacobs, you'd have a program director, construction manager, design manager, controls manager, and then the actual project managers that go out to the site. The first folks I said were sort of office people, the admin assistant, and then the field observers. And so we're going to be running it. They run a construction company. It'll be construction operations, folks doing construction operations, designing, site visits, looking at submittals, checking designs, in everything in between. And then on the offsite, that's the offsite members, that's the sprint start team, the project executive, sort of the quality control folks. Then the architect design and constructability review teams are offsite as well. The safety managers offsite, and then the scheduling and estimators are offsite.
So let's just, for example, we build a new elementary school somewhere, okay? These guys are involved, how? They interact with you or your department to say, okay, everything's going fine, or they interact between the architect and the contractor, or I mean, aren't we already kind of doing that, or?
To some extent, on the master schedule, we actually will have still have responsibility for project management over elementary 46 and 47. And then later in the bond program, we will have responsibility for some of the deficiency. Fort Bend ISD project managers will roll back into some of the deficiency projects once 46 and 47 have been are complete. So yes, they will function as if that from start to finish, a project manager would be responsible for getting the group together, all the communications within that group, all the coordination meetings, all the way up to design, bid, and then of course, actually building it on site. So they function just like we would function if we had our own employees doing it.
So basically, we just don't have enough people to handle all these projects.
They're augmenting, that's right, they're augmenting our staff and helping us develop our processes and procedures.
And I think another piece of it is this software. I read something in the opening paragraph about some software that would come online that would help manage some of this. And this is something new. We don't have anything like this, or?
We do not have the project management control system. That is correct. And it looks like we're going to land on one called Prolog. That is the name of the company is Prolog. It's on page 152, it is a non-proprietary type system. So it's not something that they own and are selling us specifically. It's something that we could buy if Jacobs didn't exist. This software exists.
All right. Other construction firms use it or
Yes,
something
ma'am.
like that. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So it's an industry. It would be like an industry software. Okay. Do we have any other questions or comments?
And in terms, it's we are within budget. It's 3.25% of the of the program. Their fee is 3.25% of the construction.
And so that amount is set now. I mean, so if we're able to work with them and they find efficiencies, we're able to bring those numbers down, and they're still going to get the same fee. They're not incentivized to inflate construction costs. The other thing they'll be working toward, and they understand that one of the goals of this successful program is that we'll be able to do this on our own in phase 2. And they've done that with another district, taking them from, yes, you got a good group, but helping you go to another level. So our goal is to be able to manage the bond program in phase 2 without any kind of outside help.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Cleaver. Our next item is the field lighting bleachers and press box at Clements High School. Do we have questions on this one? Mrs. Bailey.
Just a quick question. Was this in the budget, or is this something that just came up? I mean, I know that their fields are in horrible condition, and I'm glad to see it, but I'm just curious. Was we all looking at this when
I arrived here in October of 12, and not immediately, but probably within the first 90 days, I was told, you know, Clements is the only football field without lighting. And it's true. And that's the only athletic field in the district without lighting. And so that's what prompted the discussion. And we're at a point now where, in talking with Steve on budget, the 2007 bond funds are at a point now where they need to be expended. And this seemed to be a reasonable request. And if you'll notice, we actually are asking for, you know, to establish the entire budget, not just for the lights, but also for some bleachers, to actually to do it right from the start. Because what I would not like to have happen is we put in lights, and then the next thing is that we have to put in bleachers, and then we have to move the electric lines to put in the bleachers, and then I'd rather master plan it and do it once and be done with it. So that was the nature of why we scoped it like we did. That's why we didn't include just lighting, because that's really not a complete.
I agree there. I mean, the bleachers are unsafe. So I agree with the whole thing being done. I guess the question that comes to mind is, I know we didn't look at athletic fields for our first part of the bond, phase one. I do know we have some athletic field conditions in our middle schools, so I guess as you all go forward, are you addressing some of those needs too? Like bleachers, at middle schools that are about falling apart, so.
I have not personally taken a look, but I will at the middle schools.
That would be great. Thank you.
Is there a track around this football field at Clements?
Yes, ma'am.
So that's already there?
Yes, ma'am.
And that's going to stay there?
Correct.
All right. And is there, I didn't see anything mentioned in this about a scoreboard. Is there a scoreboard there?
No scoreboard in this particular proposal, no, ma'am.
Is there one that already exists, or?
They're saying yes.
Okay, Mr. O'Neill says that one exists. Good, and it's properly grounded, and the light bulbs work?
A functioning scoreboard.
A functioning, I'm not, you know, well, if we're going to have games there, then we need to have the thing that goes with the games. It's great to have lights, but if you don't know what the score of the soccer game is, it's not that fun.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions on this one? All right. Moving on then to, this is Clutch City Sports and Entertainment for commencement exercises at Toyota Center. Do we have any questions on that? This is consistent, Mrs. Porter, with what we've done the previous years, right?
Early in 2014, the board approved a 2-year agreement with Clutch City for the graduation exercises, and all the amendment does is to add the dates for the 2014-15 school
Okay.
year.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Any questions on that? Trustees, put those dates on your calendars. And the dates 3 days before, so you can get lots of rest.
3 days after.
And 3 days after to recover. Right. All right, the next one. The next one is a resolution about a grant for elementary school resource officers. Do we have any questions on this? Is this a 1-year grant, or is it a 3-year grant? It's just, the resolution is to go forward for 1 year, and then we'll evaluate and decide if we're doing 2 and 3?
Actually, it's a 3-year grant.
Okay.
The first year is 100% funded. The second year is 80% funded. We match 20%. The third year is 60% funded. We match 40%. Not to exceed $125,000 each year.
All right, so it's going forward for the 3-year program.
That's correct.
And then will we be using these officers sort of as pilots in a certain area in the district to sort of gauge their effectiveness, or is it going to be sort of across the board? They're going to be stretched really thin from 46 going on 47 campuses, or how are we doing it?
Everybody's excited tonight about something, and I'm excited about this one. So I heard that we don't like inequity. So I don't want to put one officer at a couple of schools. I want to try this at all the schools at the elementary. So if we have 45, 46 schools.
47.
Well, yeah, it'll be 47, but coming online, we can split the schools up so each officer can make it to every elementary school in their area. If we split the district in half, each one of the 2 officers can make it to every elementary school within a week to a week and a half. Our plan is to use them to establish those relationships with the elementary school kids and help. We heard that in the December community meeting that I went to. And when I talked about my vision of putting elementary school officers there to do that, it drew applause from the audience. And I was really kind of taken back by that. I didn't expect that, but I'm really anxious to get these officers to interact with these kids. They love the uniform. They love the officers when we walk in. And this is our opportunity to let them realize who we are and learn to trust us, and they can come talk to us, and instead of somebody else telling them who we are. They're going to see us through their middle school and high school career here. And so we want to establish those relationships at an early age. We already do some of this already. Meadows Elementary, we have a letter writing program that we do every single year with them. There are already things that we do with elementary school students, but this will allow us to expand. We'll do some surveys with the parents. We'll do some surveys with the kids, talking about their feelings towards police, and then over time we'll go back and resurvey them. So this is something that we can establish some data on each year, and then determine whether this is a feasible program. This is kind of out of the box thinking. There's not a whole lot of people that are doing anything like this, and so but that's kind of how we work. So
I do think I'd add to what Chief is saying by saying this is, we haven't specifically addressed it, but this is kind of included in our safety and security plan. So it is an extension. It's a way to start to seed money it, to get it going before we make a big district investment.
Exactly.
All right. Mrs. Tossan.
I just really wanted to say thank you, because it clearly is out of the box, and it's clear that you're passionate not just about, you know, protecting our kids, but about educating them, and that really is our business. And I really appreciate that, and I think it's critically important to get in with the kids at the elementary level, and so I just applaud you for this, and I wanted to say thank you for...
Thank you very much. It's a team effort.
Mega dittos, Chief.
I think Mr. George has...
I just wanted to echo the same thing, because I think that is so important, and I'm glad you thought about it and trying to do something about it, because our small children should learn more about you all and what you do, why you're there, and having that connection. Because I have a 7th grader, and she, a police officer in her school, I know personally, and I said, "Did you say hi to him?" She said, "Oh no, we cannot," because they feel like you know what I'm trying to say.
Right, exactly.
And I don't want that. I don't want that. And so thank you for what you're doing. Absolutely. I appreciate it.
Will y'all come to the grant meeting with us then?
Yes. We will.
No.
Right. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief Ryder. All right, the next item is affiliation agreement between HBU and Fort Bend ISD. Do we have any? The next one is with DeVry, which is a similar thing.
Yes.
Mr. George, go ahead.
Yeah, excuse me. I strongly believe there should be a program or a system in place for our educators to go and further educate themselves. But my concern in this both item I read, I felt like that's my feeling, not enough incentive for educators to take up that, it is a challenge when you have family, when you have a job, go and do them, further studies. So I feel like we should give them more incentive. Here it says 10% tuition support and things of that nature, but I think we should give more incentives so that they will take that challenge. And I don't even mind adding maybe a bond or something. Okay, when you get this benefit from the district, if it is legally possible, saying that you have to serve the district for X number of years or whatever. You understand what I'm trying to say. But I think, personally, I feel like this is not enough. We should seriously look into it, give more incentive so that they could pursue that, educate themselves further.
I was going to ask Phyllis on the HBU on the bilingual. Do we pay for the certification? We do not?
Please use.
Okay.
Yeah.
Currently, we do not pay for any of our affiliation agreements. It's just an opportunity for teachers to be able to pursue advanced degrees without having to go to the university. We host them here at our campuses. So that's the incentive, is that they don't have to go out and spend an hour and a half in traffic to pursue the advanced degrees. But we do not incur any expenses for individuals to pursue these advanced degrees. We currently do not have a tuition reimbursement program.
Now, I will tell you, I've done a tuition reimbursement program, and there is value to doing that, but you always, especially in education, you get into the idea that you've prepared people for a job where then they can leave you and go somewhere else and take the investment you've just made. So I do think there's a great value in offering the program in the district the way we do. We do it through U of H, through HBU. There's a number of opportunities we provide. And that's not to say we would never do tuition reimbursement or some other kind of incentive, but it can get costly, and we want to make sure we're truly preparing people for the jobs we need performed in our organization as well.
Dr. Dupree, we did recently have an English as a second language, the ELL certification. It was not a degree program, but we did offer preparation for that certification test and provided incentives, because that's such a huge scheduling issue for our high schools. So we have done that, but it was not within agreement with the university. We did that through Region 4.
Great. I had one question on the recommendation, Mr. Morris. Maybe you can answer this, or Dr. Dupree. The last phrase there talks about sort of opening this up to any future affiliation with colleges, universities, and alternative certification programs. And it's in both of the agenda items. It seems that we're just, with the passage of this, the way this is written, it's up to the administration then to approve these future agreements? Or we would still have authority over that, or the board would not?
Well, that's the way that I read the recommendation, that you would be delegating that authority to the superintendent to enter into similar affiliation agreements.
Like for all time, or just for?
Well, I don't see any limitation in time.
All right. Is that the intention of the administration? I'm just wondering, because I guess my view would be we should edit that part out in both of them, because I don't know. That's my view. So, does anybody have any other thoughts on that?
Just put a time period in it.
Right. Okay.
Cynthia Rincon is familiar with this.
Mrs. Rincon, welcome.
Is this on? Yes, it is. Okay. Actually, what happens is the Department of Human Resources will get information from various universities, and sometimes the universities want to enter into agreements for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, depending on the program. Sometimes they want to offer a program for several years because they want to keep a cohort going, and oftentimes it's difficult for the administration to then come back and get the board's approval because we're doing the same thing, offering educational opportunities for our staff. So we thought, given that it's similar agreements with only some of the terms different for the particular schools, but we really are trying to have a standard agreement with the schools. We're just starting this process the last couple of years and thought we were at a place where we are getting to know the universities such that you would feel comfortable allowing the superintendent to sign those agreements. But we're not looking at different, we're really not looking at material terms that are different. Similar to the student groups that go out to, for example, affiliation agreements with student groups that go out to the hospitals, and we talked about those in past board meetings where the students will go out. That was the same thinking, that we have similar agreements for the employees that perhaps you would see merit in allowing the superintendent to be able to enter into those agreements without having to come to a board meeting every time.
Okay. Mrs. Towson, do you have a comment?
How many do we expect to get?
Well, we don't, I mean, I couldn't tell you how many we have right now. 7? 7. But again, we're not talking about every single year. Sometimes they want to enter into an agreement for several years, so.
So are we expecting to expand beyond the 7? How much beyond the 7?
That I would have to defer to Dr. Young.
It really varies depending upon the need. Right now, we're looking at a counseling, bilingual and special ed, but if we notice that there is a decrease in the number of librarians, we may enter into another agreement to design a cohort specifically for librarians. So it really depends upon our needs assessment from year to year.
Well, maybe if we had a standardized agreement presented to us for approval, that would help us going forward so that we get something that we say, yes, we like this agreement, we approve this, and then
right, we could approve it for a 3-year period or a 5-year period or something.
And it could be, entered into by the superintendent for that period is with whomever he chooses.
We are making a concerted effort to have a standardized agreement, not only for the employees but for the students. Sometimes we have problems, though, that established institutions do not wish to enter into our agreements, and we'll work with them, but it sometimes becomes difficult. And at the end of the day, we find the value is in the program that we're providing for the employees or the students versus fussing over our agreement, their agreement.
Is there not one that's pretty standard in the industry, or one that many organizations, there's really not? Not at this point, no, not at all. Again, we have been working on that quite deliberately this past school year so that we could try to get that. And we have standard agreements that we'll ask them to enter into, but again, established institutions tend to. Get a lot of pushback from
yes, we do.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Of course, you do have the option to add a term limit to the recommendation, even with what we're dealing with right now.
Perhaps just so that it's something that we come back and revisit in a certain period of time.
So does this affiliation agreement have an endpoint in it? There's 2 here, one from HBU and one from DeVry. Do they have endpoints? I seeing nodding. Do they have?
Yes, these particular contracts do. And we don't like to enter into agreements with people for, without an end.
Good, I'm glad.
We really don't. We don't even like the automatic renewals because, things change. Things change, exactly. The needs of the district change, not only for the teachers but the students, and everything changes.
So maybe, okay. Thank you. I guess I would say, if we just took the phrase out, we just ended at after affiliation agreement and left any future affiliation agreements that, as well as, everything after as well as, and left that off of these two things. I think that'd be fine until if we can't have a standardized thing, and it seems like we need to have some constraints.
We will make that change.
Thank you, Dr. Dupree. All right. Any other questions on that? All right, moving on then to PDOS appraisers, Linda Marsters and Linda Ruckman being added to the PDOS list. They're back. Sorry, that was very irreverent of me, but we're glad for them. All right, any questions on that? Okay, sorry. Minutes. Any questions or changes to the minutes? All right. Anybody? All right. Then the next thing is the trustee election to be conducted May 9th. This is the order of election. It lists the polling places and all of that stuff. Do we have any questions or comments on this? All right. Then the next thing is the legislative priorities, which we can take it up next week. Let me just give you a little introduction. Because I don't think we need to hash it all out, but and I'm all for hashing it out. I guess I just wanted to get it out there so that, because people are asking my opinion or the board's opinion, and you know, we have these days planned to go to Austin, and so if there's things that we can agree on or that we can talk about that we want to be sure to put forward, and it's okay to not agree on everything, but we just want to give some direction. So one idea is to sort of have sort of a subcommittee or something if people look at this in more detail. I don't know if that's something that you'd be interested in, Dave, or
Sure.
if that's the best way to go about it, or is the best way for all of us to sit here and go over all this stuff?
All of us to sit here. We shouldn't have subcommittees.
All right.
Yeah, and that's fine. I do think we should all agree on it and on all the points, but I think there are some things that concern me in here.
Okay, that's fine. And were there any topics that you thought were missing off the list? Is there anything that you felt, or that, and if anybody thought there were things missing, we can make sure to add that to the list and maybe have some background information collected for the next time we get together, which would be next week. So if you have anything, send me an email or send Dr. Dupree an email.
Perhaps just a suggestion, if we're going to discuss this next week, maybe we could do it earlier on the agenda, since it's not something that we were able to go over tonight, because clearly we're all going to have opinions, so just a suggestion.
Okay, well, maybe we can do it first or something.
Or we're tired, which I...
Right, and I get that. I just wanted to get it out there as something that, so we have some awareness that we need to talk about at some point. And if we can't come to any agreements, then that's okay too. We've at least had a public conversation about it, so I'm good with that. All right? All right. So our next thing is audience response to our review. Where is Mrs. Porter? Okay, do we have any audience item? Do we have any speakers? I don't even, members of the public? They've all given up. I know, isn't it a surprise?
We can roll some more videos or something.
Some search for YouTube.
You don't like that, huh?
All right. I think Mrs. Cruz went to double check, but if there are no audience items, then we are ready for adjournment.
And to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor of adjourning, please say aye. Any opposed? All right, we're adjourned.